Chris to open his window.
Just around the corner, there's a rainbow in the sky.
So we take each other's hand, 'cause we seem to understand the urgency.
So I'll be your friend.
And I'll be your lover.
Watch Dr. Drew's new show at 9 on HLN. Weeknights on HLN.
How old were you when you first realized that you were a girl?
Ever since I could express myself, I always knew that I was
You
a
should,
girl
at
when
least by now, find yourself wondering, can it really be this bad? Especially if you watched part 1 and now are watching this part. You got to be thinking that by now, even if you're not a Christian. Is it really that bad? Well, do the things we watch and the things we listen to affect us? Many would argue that they don't. Some would say, where are the parents at? Why don't the parents stop this if it's so bad? Could the problem actually be that the parents, like some of you listening to me, think that it's not that big of a deal? It's just music. It's just a cartoon. Surely it couldn't have anything bad in it now, could it?
You know, you're a girl, fine. I thought it would pass, but as months went by, I realized this was getting stronger. And I had a DSM-4 at home and looked in it, and there is a diagnosis for gender identity disorder in children. And she hit 5 out of the 5 of the markers for it. So by age 3, I had a pretty good idea
What you were dealing with. Did that prompt you then to seek medical help, or did you just roll with it further?
Right, yeah, at that time. I went and sought medical help at that time. Actually, the pediatrician around 2.5, 3 said, you know what, I think you have a problem, you might want to seek a specialist, and I did. And they confirmed what I had diagnosed at home. And at that time, you know, we were devastated. You know, it's not, you don't want to hear your child has any disorder. But since then, we've been trying to make the best of it and just support her and let her guide us.
Johanna, Dr. Olson, you deal with this all the time.
Yes.
And so this is not an uncommon story for you to hear what we're calling gender identity disorder of childhood.
That's correct.
Okay. But there's confusing and conflicted language all around this disorder, isn't there?
Yes,
in fact,
there
we
is.
call it a disorder even as something that people argue about. Tell me where the medical community is now about this.
I think the medical community is all over the place. I think it's really difficult. It's not something you're taught about in medical school. It's not something you're taught about.
By the way, not taught about in medical school. Exactly right. I don't think anyone's taught about it really specific. You hear about it a little bit in adults, but you don't hear about it in children.
That's correct. And I think just the idea that people are transitioning, or social transitioning, which is changing your hair, your clothes, maybe your name and maybe your pronouns in childhood, is a really rare and new phenomenon.
Good, bad?
Depends who you ask. I personally think there are children who are suffering so much and have so much social dysfunction that they drive a social transition themselves.
And so should Jazz be encouraged to continue the way she's doing it? Is this a healthy way to approach this problem?
Well,
and again, I choke on the word problem and disorder because the kid doesn't seem to be suffering.
That's
right?
correct.
Doesn't there need to be some suffering associated with the disorder, right?
I think that's why people get disturbed that it's in the DSM at all. It's called a disorder, but it really is around...
Having now seen some undeniable evidence placed in children's cartoons, I want you to see other methods in which they promote their product or their show with sexual innuendos. Another technique they like to use is placing the word sex into an ad or the show, as you see here, the show House with it spray painted on the wall. And here you can see it in Cinderella as the two mouse pull beads out of each other's butt. And here 40 Days of Night poking fun at the Bible while it displays it above his crotch area. Here a scene from Harry Potter, and if you take out all the other text besides the bold big letters, it spells out porn. Here in the White Sox logo, this was popular when I was in middle school. You could just mark out a little bit of the O and it spells sex. Here in a more adult-based cartoon, although I would like to add that children will definitely watch any cartoon that's put before them. You see a blatant display of the word sex in her smoke, but although this one looks more blatant, the intentions are still there. Here in another scene from Harry Potter, if you just dim down everything but the candles at the top of the scene, you see the word sex. And here in another scene from Harry Potter, If you just turn down the tone of the lighting here, you'll see in the background smudged on the wall the word sex. And I know a lot of you guys out there aren't going to believe that I didn't Photoshop these pictures or something, so here's a challenge one for you. Go to the ATF's website and look on the flag. I have it highlighted here for you, but if you want to go there yourself, the website is on the screen right here. Go to the website and look for yourself. It's there on the American flag.
Objection overruled.
Parents across America are losing their parental rights. These aren't abusive or neglectful parents, but parents who love and protect their children. So why are good parents losing their rights?
The vast majority of parents and adults in general think that the normal, traditional rules of parents' rights are still in place, that parents get to make decisions for their children in areas of education, their upbringing, medical care, the whole gamut of parental decision-making.
The vast majority of Americans believe that moms and dads should be able to parent as they see fit. But what they don't understand is there's no legal right that allows them to do so.
The Supreme Court of the United States, throughout the history of the nation, has always treated that right of a parent to raise their child as what we call in the law fundamental.
When I realize and learn that something that I thought was a fundamental right is not a fundamental right, that is deeply troubling.
For the first time in American history, a majority of the Supreme Court no longer treats the parent's right to control and direct the upbringing of their child as a fundamental liberty.
The problem with explaining parents' rights to a person as compared to free speech rights, free speech, you say, go look in the First Amendment, there it is. But for parents' rights, there's no place to go look. You have to go read a bunch of Supreme Court decisions to see how they found it, what they've done to it in the meantime, and it's an evolving standard. That's the problem.
There are people each and every day who are scheming to take away parental rights to start to destroy the family structure.
We now have a new situation where government itself becomes the standard, and who's ever in power gets to say what your liberty is.
Without actual constitutional text, our basic parental rights can be completely written off.
It was just another ordinary day, with the exception of Daddy having the privilege of picking his little boy up from kindergarten. And he came running up to the door, and I went over to meet them.
Like I always do when I do pick him up, we just give all the materials to my wife, Tanya.
So Dave handed me Jake's things. I looked at what Jake had brought home. It wasn't just his book bag, it was also another book bag. So what I read on the front of the book bag, I was a little perplexed by. I took Jake's belongings on into the kitchen, took a closer look at the additional thing that Jacob had brought home.
Tanya got into this book bag and called me over to show me what one of the books was.
Dave, where'd you get this?
Jake had it at school. Why?
Jake, honey, who gave this to you?
Miss Johnson. I'm realizing this material has somehow been deemed appropriate to even be placed in my 5-year-old's hands.
What in the world?
It was a book meant to introduce and normalize homosexuality.
This is about introducing to my child sexuality issues at a very early age.
And they teach this in kindergarten?
Even before he's introduced by his parents.
It's just a child, Dave.
I just could not believe that they were doing this in kindergarten.
And I was worried. I didn't know. I didn't know what other discussions had taken place.
What else are they doing in that school?
We decided to email the teacher.
Hey, Tanya, can you read this and tell me what you think?
Tanya and I thought it absolutely necessary to make it clear to the teachers and administrators of that school that it is our parental right to be able to be notified when they're doing this to our children and have the option to opt our children out.
Jake can't even tie his own shoes yet.
The principal agreed to meet with us the following Friday.
I think you're both misinformed. These school materials have nothing to do with homosexuality, but with family.
She basically directed us to a gay, lesbian, straight educational network workshop.
Go to this workshop.
That's entitled How and Why to Talk to Your Children About Diversity.
It'll get rid of any wrong preconceptions you have about what we're doing.
We did not know what we were getting into at this point. The evening came for the GLSEN workshop.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
When the workshop leader came in the room, the first thing he said was,
I could talk to you about diversity, but tonight I've decided to talk about homosexuality.
I don't want to discuss heterosexuality and homosexuality or the comparisons between the two at this early age, and they made it very clear that they've decided to introduce this to young children, and they were willing to do it behind the backs of parents and without opt-out.
Let me show you what's going to be happening around here over the next few weeks.
I was very worried. Not only was my mind racing, wondering what could possibly have already taken place and what their plans were to accelerate these discussions and presentations to our 5-year-old son.
We're going to be putting more educational materials like this in every classroom.
Indeed, this is now something they're going to be rolling out more and more. So after we fully understood what they planned to do with the children, we went to the principal.
I wanted to catch you before you leave and let you know that we've both decided that we still want Jake opted out of these lessons.
And we'd like to have parental notification in advance if something like this should come up again.
I'm afraid we can't do that.
They would not accommodate at all. We had one final meeting at Estabrook Elementary School with the principal and the director of education.
There's only 2 months left until school is over.
All we're asking is for you to make an exception for one child. Just one child.
All right. That sounds reasonable. I think we can do that.
Well, thank you.
We just need to speak to the superintendent. I think we can work something out.
When she told us that accommodation may be possible just for the end of the year, we were very happy.
So at that point, I left the meeting, and Dave continued to stay in the meeting.
And as I was sitting there, I thought, finally, we're getting some accommodation. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about my child. I'm not talking about the rest of the school. We didn't say never do this. We said when you do it, as they stated they would, notify us first, and we want the option to opt out if we don't think he's ready for that. What I didn't realize was they weren't actually taking that extra time to accommodate. They were formulating another plan. They were keeping me there by leaving me with this promise and calling the police.
It looks like we're getting somewhere.
Really?
See you there.
Yes, officer, that's him over there.
Mr. Parker, I need to have a word with you.
When I saw the police come in, I thought to myself, I cannot believe they've done this to me.
You gotta be kidding me.
Getting arrested today is not going to help your cause either.
My only cause is to be a good father. I want my son opted out, and I'm not leaving here until they agree to do that.
When I was let out and put in the police car, I thought to myself, how far are they willing to go to deny us our parental rights? There needs to be some kind of protection of our parental rights.
Unbelievable.
Any form of authority which undermines the interaction and the guidance of a parent for their child has to be stopped. Parents need some form of protection because this type of thing is happening more and more and more.
If you think the David Parker case is an isolated incident, you try it. If you have a child in public school, you go down and make your voice be heard and see what happens.
There has been a slow degradation of parental rights. They have slowly dictated that they have more control within the schools than you do within the home.
The way this has come about is this idea that once a child is dropped off at a school, they enter the doors of that school, that then the parental rights evaporate. And that parent has no say over what their child will be taught, what their child will be exposed to.
What we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years is continual legislative and judicial overreach going into areas that we never thought they would reach into.
The government has a role, but it's not the role of a partner. It's the role of a backstop. If you abuse your kids, if you neglect your kids, and they have evidence of that, the government moves in, and they should move in those circumstances.